that'll do. Welcome back, everyone. This is Tim with Little Crow Gunworks. We're back out here at our private farm shooting at 640 yards. And I decided to see what we can do with that hand load, that daily driver load that we found in the last video. I decided to load that up with our 27.7 grains of N540 we were using, the 80 grain ELDM, at 1.9425 to ogive. So it was not that little, not that seeding depth that shot that little cluster of 4 with 1 off. It was half of a 10,000th longer than that. So not quite halfway between those two groups, just a little bit in front of the best one of those 4 groups. So I got the rifle zeroed with that ammo. I think we got 25 rounds left. We're gonna shoot some groups at 640 on paper. We're going to shoot 2 groups of 5 with the hand load, and then 2 groups of 5 with the factory ammo, like we did in part 2 of this series, and just see how it groups with the factory ammo compared to the 31-inch barrel. Obviously, we're looking at vertical. We're not necessarily looking at the horizontal component, because that's me and my ability to read the wind more than anything. And then we're going to see how this daily driver hand load stacks up against the factory ammo. So we have 4 shoot and see targets down there. Hopefully we'll see something, otherwise I'll be shooting blind, kind of like I was in part 2. We got a steel target down there with we got a 12-inch circle in front of a 24-inch square, just for me to get a bearing on this wind and try to stay on top of that in case I'm not able to see my impacts. I think I'm going to try to time the wind as best I can, but just hold center on the targets, and we'll see what we get down there. We've got the lab radar with us, try to track some velocity, and what else? I think that's it. So I think we're going to get started. I'll start with the hand load and get a bearing on this wind, because I have more rounds available that I can afford to lose with that, and then I'll shoot the groups with the hand load, and then we'll switch over to the factory ammo. I'm guessing we're going to have to make an elevation change, because the elevation is not going to be the same for these 2 rounds, and the wind probably won't be either. So we'll start with the hand load and we'll see what we get. First shot was 30.44 on the velocity. I got, for the solution, I dialed for 30.37, so that was our average, and first shot was 7 feet a second above that. Not too bad. Looks like our elevation's perfect, but I'm upwind a little bit, so I'll probably take, let's see, it's maybe about 6 inches at this distance. That's almost a minute, so I'll probably take 6 clicks off, and we'll see how that does. Should be somewhere around the center, maybe even still a tiny bit upwind. Write that first velocity down. Wind's perfect, just a little bit low. That velocity dropped down to 30.26. Do one more. Downwind a little bit. I know the wind did pick up there a touch. Maybe add clicks. And I think we're going to start shooting groups. So I'll probably shoot the bottom 2 targets so I have a good bearing on the elevation, and I'm guessing the factory ammo is going to be a little bit lower, so I'll shoot that at the top. But I'll start with the bottom 2 targets, and I'll go left, right, left, right, left, right, and shoot all 10 shots, and then I'll switch the solution and all that for the factory ammo and get going. All right, we're back up on the hill, and went down and got some fresh paint on the steel so we can get a bearing on the wind with the factory ammo, and got to look at the groups with the hand loads, and they're not bad at all. So that's kind of what I expected. Again, I wasn't paying much attention to the wind, just heaving them down there. Got a good average on the wind, and then just sending them down there, trying to maintain good point of aim so we can get a good bearing on the vertical, and the vertical's really good on both groups. So one's a little bit better than the other, but you know, that could have been me, could have been who knows what, but really good nevertheless. So now we're going to get a bearing on the wind with the hand load, and then we'll switch over to the paper and shoot some groups down there, and we'll see what we get. So I did change the solution. We did need about another 1.5 minutes of elevation, and the wind was a little bit more, but you know, about 45 minutes has passed since I shot the hand load, so the wind has changed a little bit. We'll have to get a fresh bearing on it, but this should get us on steel at least. That'll do. 29.11. It's higher than I expected. I do have the ammo sitting in the sun. It's overcast, but I don't have any shade here, so the ammo is sitting in the sun, and it doesn't feel warm to the touch, but that was a little faster than I expected. Our average was about 28.77 with this barrel length, so that's quite a bit faster. We'll see what the following shots do. I'm guessing they're going to drop down a little bit lower, and we'll have to add some more elevation, but we'll see. .42. Wow. And it's higher, which makes sense. If anything, we're upwind a little bit. Maybe take a couple clicks off. .2897, that's back down a little closer to where I thought we should be. That's that factory ammo velocity variation. I mean, this is what you have to wrestle with. As I've said many times before, that doesn't mean it won't shoot, it's just you're going to get a little more vertical like that most of the time due to that velocity variation. So I think we'll do one more. Do one more, and then switch over and shoot paper. Same spot. 29.45. Woo. All right, I think just to center up a little better. I think our wind is good. I think I'm going to add a couple clicks of elevation. That would be maybe 3 clicks, 4 clicks. And we'll do 3. And then we can't see our impacts on paper, so we will be shooting blind. But that's all right. Been working out so far. Again, we'll go left, right, be shooting at the top 2 targets. All right, we're back at the bench here. How'd we do? Well, it really good, I would say. So we'll start with the hand loads. So you know we brought this out because we knew we had what we thought was a good daily driver, and so we shot that first. And here's what we ended up with. So this first group, my handy dandy pointer here. This first group. Ended up at 5.47 inches. That's more or less all horizontal. Just because I wasn't really watching the wind too much. I basically tried to bracket it on the steel, as you saw, and then I just was sending them down the road. But the interesting part is the vertical was only 1.7 inches, which is really good. And I looked at the velocity data. So for this group, the extreme spread was 14 feet a second. So the theme that you're going to notice with this is that, once again, extreme spread didn't result in the shortest groups vertically. We found that the last time we shot at 640, we found it again. You know, on the internet, you'll see guys get super hung up on this number, and we all seem to chase it as hand loaders, but the more and more of these tests I do, the more I see that, at least at 640 yards in this gun, it doesn't seem to matter nearly as much as the internet would lead you to believe. So this group had an extreme spread of 14 feet a second and a vertical of 1.7. This group, we missed the first round, so that's a little bit skewed data, but the 4 remaining shots, the extreme spread was 8 feet a second and had a vertical of 2.27 inches. Now, could this one that was way up here have been really fast? Yes, it could have. But we'll finish up on this and we'll talk about the factory ammo. Overall, the average was, I think it was just under 2 inches. Our aggregate vertical between the two was 1.985 inches, which is fantastic. That's like a third MOA. I didn't figure that out ahead of time, but an MOA at this distance is 6.7 inches, and we're under 2, so whatever that is, a third, almost a quarter MOA of vertical. Really good. So yeah, so as a daily driver, I would say it shot really well, and with this, it shot good enough that I feel comfortable stretching it out further, and you'll see that in the next video. I decided to take the remaining rounds from this load and shoot it at a steel plate at 1,030 yards. So that'll be the next video that comes out, so you can see how this thing did once we really stretched it out. But overall, really good load. Could it be better? Sure, probably. But if this suits your needs, why keep dumping money down the hole and wasting time on components and testing? If this is adequate for what you're trying to do, get out there and practice. You know, get out there and learn how to read wind and get better at cold calling, and rather than just, you know, take a shot, see where it lands, and kind of walk it into the target. Just try letting some time pass and go, okay, I think this is 7 miles an hour. Lay down and shoot. And get good at making those kinds of calls to improve your shooting for, you know, whether it's for hunting purposes or whatever. Now when we go up to the factory ammo, this, every time I shoot the factory ammo, I'm like, all right, what's going to happen today? Because it seems to be very like Jekyll and Hyde, where it's a lot more unpredictable than the Handload, and I never know what I'm going to get, but I'm always surprised, and I'm always surprised in a good way, other than when we shot it at 100 yards at this 28-inch barrel length and it shot terrible. Based on this data, I'm thinking that was an anomaly, and it was because I had just really scrubbed the barrel and it wasn't fouled in yet, and that's why it shot so poorly, and I'll go into why. So, of the two groups, this first one had 6.44 inches of vertical. You know, I don't know. Some of this could have been me. I don't think it was, but I think, you know, maybe it was a bad bullet or whatever. Something weird about the neck tension of the case or something. You know, who knows? But on this one, again, the extreme spread was 36. Not awful, but not great. This one, the vertical was under 2 inches, 1.93, so less than a third of the vertical. This ES was 36, this was 41. I'm ready to just take everything I've learned about velocity and just throw it up in the air. Because this defies the logic that we hear all over the internet. And I'm not saying there aren't circumstances where it matters and where people have proved that it matters, but you guys, I've seen so much stuff online, like, you know, these F-class guys and the competition guys, they kind of pave the way for the rest of us, and they pour gobs of money down the hole trying to learn this stuff, and because of the internet, they're able to share it with us. And they have shot marker systems where they can shoot at 1,000 yards, and it's an electronic target, and the system will tell them what the velocity was of each shot and where it hit. And what you'll see is, like, this is a good example. So we'll have vertical dispersion like this, and you go, okay, well, this was the fastest shot because it hit the highest. Then this one, then these two were almost identical velocity. Then this one was clearly the slowest. No, that's not how it works. You look at these guys' targets, and I'm sure the velocity matters to some degree, but, you know, each of these bullets, as I talked about in part 2, each of these bullets has a different ballistic coefficient, slightly, just through manufacturing tolerances. So what you'll see when these guys post their targets is you're like, okay, that's the fastest one. No, it might be like third from the slowest, and then this one is who knows where else. And these two that have identical vertical aren't anywhere close to the same velocity. They're whatever, they're 15, 20 feet a second apart. They might be at both ends of the extreme spread. And then this one won't be the slowest. It might be the third fastest. And you go, whoa, this doesn't make any sense. And that's why I've been harping on, like, get out and test it. Because you don't really know anything. You can sit there and hypothesize all you want. You know, I could have shot this factory ammo at 100 yards like I did with the 28-inch barrel. Got 1.25 wide groups. I think our average was a little over 1.25. It was like 1.2. Well, it was about 1.25. It was like 1.245. And I could have said, wow, this isn't worth shooting at 640 yards, because when it was a 31-inch barrel, the average was 0.795. You know, it was 50% better. So this isn't worth shooting. But I didn't do that because I know better, and I've done this too many times to know that, like, doing something once isn't proof. You know, and yes, I have a taller group of the lower ES. This is one time, that's not proof. But the same thing happened at 640. You know, I have these targets from when we shot with a 31-inch barrel at 640 the first time. If you remember this, I'll link part 2 if you haven't seen it. The same thing occurred. So I did some numbers here and figured some things out, so bear with me. On test 2, factory ammo, the aggregate was a 5-inch vertical with all of these targets, but that was 20 shots. This is only 10 shots. So to make it fair, I did some other analysis, and I said, well, okay, if we, from this first test, if we eliminated the group with the best vertical and eliminated the group with the worst vertical and just took the two in the middle, what's the average? Well, the average out of test 2 would have been 4 inches of vertical. This time the average was 4.185 inches of vertical. That's a rounding error at that point. In the first test at 640 with the 31-inch barrel, the average was 2904 feet a second. This was 2901. The SD for those middle two groups on the first one was 15.23. This time it was 15.37. Another rounding error. ES on the second test was 51. This time it was even worse. It was 60. But the results were almost identical. And then if you took, from this second test, if you took the two worst groups, the average was 7 inches of vertical with an average velocity of 2898. That's not the payoff. The payoff is the worst two groups of vertical on this test had an SD of 11, just over 11, and an ES of 40. So 11 and 40 for the worst two, and the middle two was 15.23 and 51. What am I saying? I'm saying that the groups that had the worst vertical had the best velocity numbers. How do you make sense of this? You know, like, that's why, don't get lost in this wormhole on the internet where it's like, oh, well, if my velocities aren't good, I'm never going to be able to shoot long range. I got to waste all this time and money at 100 yards trying to make everything perfect. Well, that's not what I'm finding. You know, obviously the Handload is shooting really good and these velocity numbers are spectacular. But, you know, if the average of this is 4 and the average of this is 2, well, these velocity metrics are 3 times as good. So this SD is under 5. This is 15. This ES was 14. This is 60. These velocity metrics are way, way better. And the vertical is only reduced by 50%. So, what am I saying? I'm saying get out and shoot. You know, like, don't get lost in this stuff. I've just been chewing through these numbers, and it was like, all my hair was standing up, and I'm like, I got to get as much of this information out as to anybody who will listen, because, you know, again, this is just our 22 Nosler. It's not the be-all, end-all, but this goes against all the drivel that you hear online. That the velocity numbers have to be spectacular. Well, no, they don't. I think we're the biggest, you know, chink in the armor here. Like, we're the weakest link for sure. And if we get our fundamentals sewed up, you know, I'm not saying I'm a perfect shooter, but I've been doing this a while and I practice a lot and all that. And I feel confident when I break a shot that it was in the right place. And if it wasn't, I make a note, you know. So I feel like my fundamentals are fairly well buttoned up, but, you know, can always be improved. But I'm just, you know, and what you're seeing here is the rifle and ammunition's performance. I don't think there's some of me in here, but, you know, not a lot. And what I'm seeing is that the numbers don't matter nearly as much as you would be led to believe. They don't. That's not what I'm seeing. I mean, based on the groups that we shot at 100 yards with a 28-inch barrel, where the average group size was 1.245 inches. If you scale that out to 640 yards, you don't scale it out by distance, you scale it out by time of flight. I talked about that in another video, where you take the time of flight to 640, time of flight to 100, and you divide the 640 flight time by the 100 flight time, then you multiply it times the 100-yard group size, and that gives you this group size. Well, that 1.25 inch average at 100 yards, that extrapolates out to 9.5-inch groups minimum, like without accounting for the high ES or any of that, just dispersion. But you start taking in all these other factors, the fact that the ballistic coefficients are different from bullet to bullet, and, you know, the wind and different effects that can have on, you know, not only horizontal but vertical components. Neither of these groups are anywhere near 9.5 or 9.75 inches. This one's the closest, and it's still 33% less, and this one's half. So, I don't know. Get out and shoot. That's the long and the short of it. But I wanted to review this with you guys. I know this is a little more long-winded, but man, every time I take this thing out, I'm like, what am I going to find today? Because I can't predict it, you know, especially when you start stretching it out. When you do the 100-yard and 200-yard stuff, it's good information, but it's kind of uneventful. Where this stuff, it's like, I really am curious every time I go out, like, what is this thing going to do today? So what's next? Next, like I said, we shot this at 1,030 yards. So stay tuned for that. You're not going to want to miss that one. And then after that, I think we're going to shelve this load. And as I mentioned in part 7, we're going to go and do a ladder test with N550 to try to get a little higher velocity than this, but at this same pressure or even lower pressure than this, to try to extend that brass life. I've been dinking around with that Gordon's reloading tool and N550 with this higher case capacity that I mentioned, that 37 grains of water capacity. 550 looks pretty good. So I think, and the optimal barrel time, which I've talked about before, that it looks like the optimal barrel time for 28 inches is going to be somewhere in the 30-70, 30-60, 30-70, 30-80. So we'll see if that holds true and if it wants to shoot there. But I'm going to be doing that ladder test next. So this was part 8. Part 9 will be at 1,030. I guess that'll be part 10. And we'll see if we can get a load that that we're comfortable moving forward with, and see if we can turn it into either a daily driver or a sports car, or see what we get out of it. See maybe if we get both. We'll see what happens there. And then once we have that, I think we're going to be getting to the point where we're just about ready to build the product rifle in its final form and do some testing there. And we'll still keep continuing. You know, we'll go down to 25 inches like we said originally and test there. We won't do any more load development there. We'll probably just take the load that we have done and see what it shoots in a 25-inch barrel, and then again crop it to 22, test it there. And we'll do the same thing that we've been doing. We'll test the factory and hand load at 100 and 640 and do all that, and then at the end we'll do a big data thing where we go over and say, okay, well, here was the trend we saw with group size, vertical, blah blah, and you know, I can bury you guys in information. It's just, I need to know. Tell me in the comments whether or not you actually want to know all this stuff. So, because I'm just guessing, and you can probably tell I'm a big numbers nerd, and this stuff just fascinates me. But some people, it's like, okay, well, tell me what I need to know, and then let's get on to the next thing. So that's what's next. So we'll get into the 550 hand load, see where that takes us, and then I think we're not too far from getting to where we can chamber up and spin up a barrel for the finished product. We're going to have 4 of those built right away with different stocks and a couple different barrel lengths, and we're kind of just testing the waters to see what guys are interested in. 2 different stock manufacturers and a couple different colors, and the action will be the same across both the bottom metal, triggers, barrel manufacturer. I think we're going to thread them but not put brakes on them. So anyway, stay tuned. I'll go into more of that as we go along here. But hope you found this interesting. Again, thanks for watching as always. Like it, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Share it with your friends. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.